Your lesson essential question is, how do we read picture graphs? So we're going to work on analyzing data on a picture graph. And if you look over here, this is an example of a picture graph. A picture graph uses pictures to represent numbers or data. And we're going to work on reading the picture graphs today. So reading and just kind of figuring out what everything means. So you won't be really solving too many problems today. You won't be making your own graphs. You're just going to be looking at some graphs and reading them. So let's take a look at this picture graph up here at the top. Okay, information that you collect is called data. So I want you to remember the word data. Data is usually represented in numbers. So for an example, in my job as a teacher, I collect data by looking at your test scores and your iReady scores. So information that we collect is called data. A scaled picture graph uses pictures or symbols to show data. So think there are different types of graphs. A picture graph is one type of graph. You probably remember learning about them in athletics last year. But a picture graph uses pictures to show the data. Over here is another example of a picture graph. The scale is the value each picture or symbol represents. And then the key explains the scale used in the graph. So if you take a look at the bottom of this picture graph, we have a key, and the key kind of gives us answers about the graph. So if you see two sticks crossed, that means two teams. So East Falls has 2, 4, 6, and then one stick is one team. So 6 plus 1 is 7. So East Falls has 7 teams. Picture graphs are pretty easy to read, but sometimes if a picture equals more than one, you might have to do some repeated addition or some multiplication. So let's use the key. Look at the data for the East Falls League, which we just did. There's 3 double sticks and 1 single stick. The 3 double sticks represent 3 times 2. So like we said before, 6 teams. The 1 stick represents 1 times 1, so 1 team. And all we have to do is add them together. 6 plus 1 is 7. There are 7 teams in the East Falls League. When we're looking at data, we might answer questions about the graph. So how many more teams does the East Falls League have than the South Falls League? Well, looking at this question, it's asking how many more. Now here's a question for you. When I see the words how many more, do I need to add or subtract? You do need to subtract when you see how many more because we're looking for the difference. So we'll use the picture graph to write equations and compare the two rows. 3, so we have 3 double sticks times 2. We know a double stick equals 2. And then plus this one extra is 7, which we did before. And then South Falls has 2 double sticks, so 2 times 2, and that equals 4. We take our two cities and we just subtract to find our answer. So East Falls has 7. Whoops. South Falls has 4. 7 minus 4 equals 3. So the East Falls League has 3 more teams than the South Falls League. So again, this is a picture graph. And this is a bar graph. So this is data represented in bars. So a scaled bar graph uses bars to represent and compare Information. This bar graph shows the number of goals scored by different players on a hockey team. The scale shows the units used. On this bar graph, each horizontal grid line represents 2 units. Every other grid line is labeled 0, 4, 8, and so on. For example, the line halfway between 4 and 8 represents 6 goals. So what they're talking about is these numbers right here. This is your scale. So when we have a scale, it's kind of like a number line that goes up and down instead of left to right. And not every number has to be on the scale. So you can see here we're counting by 4s. I know that between 0 and 4, halfway between those two is 2. So this line right here, even though it's not labeled, I know that it equals 2. So coming over to this green bar to figure out how many goals Alex scored, I know there's not a number attached, but I know that we're counting by 4s, and this is between 16 and 20. Between 16 and 20 is 18. So when you're looking at a bar graph, you really have to be thinking, what are we counting by? Sometimes you might have to figure out what comes between two numbers that are represented. A bar graph will always have a title at the top so that you know what the data is that you're looking at. So this is hockey goals scored by players. All right. Down here it says name of player, so it's labeled so I know what exactly, or right now whose data I'm looking at. And then of course, like we said before, your scale is going to be on the side over here. So you learned about 2 different kinds of graphs today. You learned about this picture graph, and you learned about this bar graph.